You have a few options when it comes to growing your garden. You can buy plants and put those directly into the ground. You can start growing plants yourself indoors from seed, and then when they're ready, transplant them outside. Or you can take seed packets and put these out directly into the ground. Hi, I'm Gardener Scott, and I discuss everything gardening so that you can become a better gardener. Today, let's talk about how to direct sow seeds. Most of the plants in my vegetable garden are started from seed sown directly outdoors. And there's a few reasons for this. First, there are hundreds of plants in these beds. Imagine how much time and space would be involved if I started all of them in little pots indoors, and then had to bring them all outside, and then had to transplant each of the plants. Well, I'm not going to do that. It's so much easier to just take a seed, put it in the ground, and get it growing. Depending on the length of your growing season, there are some plants that just work better to put them out as plants. Tomatoes and peppers are a prime example. I just can't grow tomatoes from seed. It would take too long before the frost settles in and I'd never get a harvest. If you live in a region that's very warm with a very long growing season, you might be able to start tomatoes from seed. Not me. But almost all of the other plants that I'm growing in the vegetable garden, besides the tomatoes and the peppers, can be started from seed because my growing season is long enough for them to germinate, grow, and then reach the point where I can harvest. The way to tell whether you have enough time in your growing season to grow the plants that you want is to look at the seed packet. Most seed packets will tell you the days to harvest. That's how much time it takes after the plant has germinated and started to grow until you can harvest it. So, for example, this Moon and Stars melon is 80 days to maturity. That's the same as days to harvest. That's the point when I can expect these melons to be ready to pick off the vine. This Boston pickling cucumber is 55 days until I can actually start harvesting. Within 2 months, I can have this plant growing and enjoy some of the pickling cucumbers. There are some seed packets, like from Baker Creek, that don't tell you on the package how many days it takes, but you can only buy these online. And online at their website, they'll tell you how many days it takes. So when you're choosing your seed to put in your garden, make sure that you have enough days in your season to start from seed and then reach the point that you can harvest before the plants will die from cold weather. This is one of the beds that I'll be growing in today. I filled it with a soil that was amended with compost and humus and other organic material. It's really going to be beneficial for the soil microbes. Ultimately, that's what feeds our plants. I've leveled the bed pretty well. After filling, I took a rake and then went over the surface and tried to get it as smooth as possible. And then I've kept it moist since I filled it. You really want to sow seeds in moist soil. Don't start with dry soil. You're starting behind. With a moist soil, the seeds can begin germinating right away, which is what you want. Before and after you start sowing seeds, look for big chunky sticks and little rocks, anything that might impede the growth of the seedlings, because they're going to be pretty small. And if they happen to come up underneath a little rock, that'll definitely affect the growth of the plant. Just take these and remove them from the bed. I'll be growing Boston pickling cucumbers in this part of my bed. And so the seeds I'm sowing today actually come from 2 different companies, only because I'm going to do a test to see which of these might be better. On the seed packet, you can expect to find some very important information. Basically, how to sow the seeds. Now, when I look at MI Gardener, it tells me that it'll be 7 to 14 days to germination. I should start the seeds 4 to 6 inches apart and then ultimately space them 8 to 10 inches apart, which means I'll have to thin out some of the plants at a different time. But it doesn't tell me how deep to sow the seeds. Baker Creek tells me that they should be sown 1/2 inch deep. They'll also sprout in 7 to 14 days. It just says the plant spacing should be 18 to 36 inches apart. It's the same plant, and you can see different companies will give you different information. Some of it comes with experience in deciding which way to go. Ultimately, I'm going to space my cucumber plants about 12 inches apart, just because I know how much they spread. Don't be confused when you get conflicting information. Just do some searches online or watch some videos to try to find out what recommendations might work best for you. I have a couple preferred methods when it comes time to put the seeds in the ground. One is to just dig a very shallow trench. These seeds are going about 1/2 inch deep, so that means the trench is about 1/2 inch deep. And then you lay out the seeds. Now, let's follow close to what In My Gardener says and place these about 6 inches apart. So we just put them in the bottom of our trench, 6 inches apart, and then we fill in the trench by covering the seeds. Another option, let's go ahead and move over about 12 inches, is to lay out the seeds on the ground in your preferred spacing, and then just press them into the soil at the appropriate depth. Again, about 1/2 inch. And then I'll lightly bring soil over to cover up the seeds. You see how fast and easy sowing seeds can be. There's a third technique that is used by a lot of gardeners as well, and it actually uses a tool. It's called a dibble or a dibbler or a dibble stick, and it's basically just an implement to make a hole. You make your hole in the soil and then drop the seed in it. Depending on the size of the seed, you might want to use something thicker, like a piece of bamboo or a bigger dibble stick. I find that the dibble, whether it's a pencil, bamboo, or something you buy or make, works better for seeds that need a very precise depth, and usually a deeper sowing. So peas, for example, often are sown 1 inch to maybe 2 inches deep. A dibble can work really well for that. And it works best on moist soil, so that when you push it into the ground and then remove it, the hole actually stays behind and doesn't fill in with dry soil. I'll finish this bed with some early prolific straight neck squash and the Moon and Stars melon. Now, this tells me that these should be spaced 12 to 24 inches apart with a depth of 1/2 inch to 1 inch. As I get to this side of the bed, it's not as level and smooth, so I'll go ahead and actually just use my fingers to help level out the bed a little bit more. This really helps with watering and rain, because if you have any low spots, well, the water is going to tend to go to that low spot, and it's entirely possible that the seeds you're sowing could wash into that low spot. So I always try to ensure that my planting surface is as level as possible, because the rake isn't a perfect tool. I've put a plant tag where I had the last of the cucumbers, and now I'll come over again about 12 inches and start my seeds. Now, my preferred method, I think it goes a little bit faster, is to lay the seeds on the soil and then just push them in. Cover them up, and this row is done. And I'll just continue this to the end of the bed. The melon seeds said to sow 2 to 3 feet apart. And that's not just the space between those seeds. That's also the space from the previous row. So I sowed them about 2 feet away from the squash and then put the seeds in about 2 feet apart. Now, you may have noticed that I'm estimating these distances. I chose what I thought was 6 inches and 12 inches and 2 feet, and that's where I sowed the seeds. I'm okay with rough distances. If you want a very more precise spacing, well then consider using a yardstick or making or buying a tool that is actually designed for very precise seed placement. I personally don't think that's necessary. It's close enough to just estimate when you sow the seeds. With the seeds sown, now it's time to water them in. The soil was moist to begin, which helps, but we want to ensure that it stays evenly moist until the seeds completely germinate. And if you remember from those cucumbers, it may be as long as 2 weeks until they germinate. It's pretty hot right now. The sun is shining. I'm probably going to have to come out every couple hours for a number of days to keep this soil nice and moist. I want it moist. I want the seeds to germinate. And if I slack off on that job and let them dry out, then I'm not going to get any plants. One way to help reduce some of the water requirements is to mulch with a very light layer of grass. New grass, dried grass, try to avoid clumps. The seeds have enough energy to push through the soil. They'll easily be able to push through a very light layer of grass. And then as they grow, I'll add additional mulch. You can dramatically cut down on the amount of water needed by sowing into a bed that already has substantial mulch on it. This is my hugelkultur mound, and I'll be planting some pumpkins and zucchini in it. So I move aside the mulch that I have on this mound, take my seeds. I'm going to put 2 zucchini seeds, and then I'll pick the one that does best and thin out the other. And I'm going to leave these seeds uncovered. I might sprinkle a little additional grass over them because the seed might not have enough energy to push through a couple inches of wood chips or another mulch. Once they do, I'll go ahead and bring this mulch back around the plant. But I need to make sure that the seedlings can emerge and grow before I cover them with mulch. And I'm not planting in the mulch. I'm planting in the soil underneath the mulch. There's another sowing technique for seeds that are very small or only need to be covered by a light amount of soil. Carrots are a perfect example. And so in this square bed garden, I have some carrots, but a deep rain caused a lot of it to wash to the other side. So I'm going to fill in some of the areas where I lost some of the seed. I'll start by just loosening the soil in the area where I'm going to broadcast these seeds. Now the seeds only go about 1/4 inch deep. And so I've just loosened the soil. And I'll take some of these seeds that are very small and then just spread them around. Ultimately, I'll thin these out to about 2 inches apart. And then with the same loose soil, I'll just work them in. Ultimately, they're going to settle down about that 1/4 inch. And if I keep this moist, I can expect more carrots to sprout like the ones in the surrounding area. I want to grow some pole beans and take advantage of this trellis that I made for my tomatoes. So at the ends of the trellis, I'm just going to sow the bean seeds by pushing them into the soil. I'll put quite a few, and I'm spacing these about 6 inches apart. I have this straw mulch. The bean will send up a pretty strong plant, enough to push through this straw. And then as they grow, I'll train them up this trellis. It's a good idea to have a trellis in place before you grow some of these vining plants. If they start sprawling around the ground and then you put a trellis up, you might damage the plants. With a trellis in place, you can train them up from the minute they grow. When you put new seeds into a bed, it's not an all or nothing proposition. I have some peas that are about a month away from harvest and some turnips that are about a month away from harvest. In between is a space where I used to have some overgrown spinach. Well, I pulled the spinach to put in some cucumbers. In about a month, the cucumbers will start spreading around this bed. Well, I'll be ready to harvest the peas and harvest the turnips, which will open up some more space for some more plants. You don't have to wait till the whole bed is empty before you start seeds. I'm using a principle called succession planting. After I pull one plant, I put another plant in. And when these peas are gone, I'll probably put some more cucumbers so that when these plants are played out and I'm done harvesting, the cucumbers over here will just be coming into their prime and I'll get a whole nother harvest of cucumbers. You don't have to worry about a plant like watermelon taking over an entire bed when you're planting 2 or 3 or 4 feet apart from each other. Take advantage of containers or grow bags. You can grow watermelons and other spreading plants in a bag like this and then move them around to get the appropriate spacing. Regardless of where you grow and how you grow, there are going to be great options for the seeds that you can grow when you direct sow them in your garden. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below. And if you'd like to become a better gardener, well, consider clicking on one of these videos for additional gardening information. I'm Gardener Scott. Enjoy gardening.